Hi, this is Bradley Barth with SC Media. I'm here at the Identiverse conference in Denver, Colorado, and my guest today is Gopal Padinjaruveetil. He is the Vice President and CISO at the Auto Club Group, also informally known as AAA. Gopal, thanks for being here today. Your session is quite the fascinating and futurism-themed one. It's going to be looking at identity in the metaverse. So right now, in the present, people have occasion to use the digital identities, but most of the time they're applying their physical identities. In the metaverse, they're going to be spending a lot more time actually using their digital identities. How does that change the whole calculus of issues like risk and trust? How does that change the game in terms of how identity management is going to have to be practiced?
Yeah, two things. You need to have an identity to enter or to be interacting with the virtual world, right? And it has to be built on trust. And today, you see, as you see in the real world, identity and authentication is kind of a friction. And we want to really remove that friction. So when you're interacting in the digital world, you want to actually have seamless interaction, and we want to have continuous authentication, we want to have verified credentials, we want to have tokens, we want to have security. But the most important thing is we want to preserve privacy, because that's something that we are all concerned about, is that we don't want to give up on privacy, our freedoms and all those things. Some of the things that we have really, as humanity, we have really fought for and reached here. Just because we want to have some fun in metaverse, we don't want to lose that, right? So, I mean, that is the key area, is that while we are having fun and work and play in the metaverse, we want it to be safe, we want it to be private, and we wanted to make sure that the freedoms, the equalities, and some of these social injustices that we have been fighting for years, and we have had great victories in those areas, that we preserve that and we transition those victories in the social arena into the metaverse. Right? So digital identity is going to play a huge role in maintaining that in the metaverse.
So Gopal, the thing about the metaverse is that for anyone spending a lot of time there, they're going to be using multiple distinct services, and if they want to have a nice seamless experience, they can't be repeatedly authenticating over and over again. So how is that problem going to be solved? Is it going to be one giant federated identity experience where all of the organizations and service providers living in the metaverse in one way or another are going to be creating some kind of federated identity system? And then what happens with users who might want to share certain information with some companies that live in the metaverse, but in other cases they want to maybe maintain more of a sense of privacy? So how does that get accomplished?
So one thing, because this has to scale, right? I mean, we're talking about 7 billion people. So at some point of time, 7 billion people are going to interact with this new world. It has to be decentralized. There's no question that such kind of systems cannot be centralized. It has to be decentralized, number one. It has to be federated. So there's two principles that it's going to be operating on. It is going to be decentralized identity, and it has to be federated. What is going to happen is there's going to be ecosystems that's created. So there's going to be multiple ecosystems based on different so healthcare or banks and organizations like AAA. And what's going to happen is that there's going to be federations within the ecosystem, both inside the ecosystems and outside the ecosystem with other ecosystems, right? So that is the nature of the interactions. And as you move from ecosystem to ecosystems, you want to have authentication, you want to pass on some credentials, and that's going to be built on trust. So you can pass, okay, I am validating, I am verifying, this is verified, so this is Gopal. So I'm passing on my credentials to another ecosystems. That trust, if that trust can be established, okay, I have verified this person, you can allow him into your house or into that world or your ecosystem and have what he wants. And then it's up to the understanding the context of that ecosystem, and if the ecosystem owner decides to have a step up at that point of time based on risk, they can actually do a step up, right? So I mean, that's where the interoperability and the ability to dynamically create risk-based authentication. I'm talking about authentication very loosely. You are not, there's no username and password. Mm-hmm. We are going to move. You've seen that everybody's talking about passwordless world, right? So it's going to be more frictionless. But behind the scenes, there will be certain times when you'll be asked to authenticate yourself, like, step up with something. It could be biometric, it could be anything. I mean, it could be voice, it could be your face, right? So there's a lot of things that can be used seamlessly to authenticate yourself, right? So it's going to be a dynamic, context-driven, risk-based, ecosystem-driven world is what I'm envisioning.
And by the sounds of it then, a form of self-sovereign identity.
You decide, I mean, that is where the privacy aspect comes, right? The owner of the identity, because it is my identity, I own the identity data, I need to decide, this is what I'm going to give the other party, the lying party, right? So that is where it's important, the self-sovereignty, that I have control over my identity and my identity data, then I willingly, with consent, I'm willing to give it to you for certain purposes, right? So that's going to be the foundational principle in this world. It has to be self-sovereign.
All right, so here's the big question then. What's the timetable on all of this? When do all of the organizations that have all of these visions of playing a major role in the metaverse, when are they going to have to figure out this whole identity process and how it's going to all come together?
That's $1 million question, but what's going to depend is, so the concept of a virtual world is not new. If you remember Second Life, so something like Second Life was started and everybody thought that that's going to really drive the virtual world. But I think it was a little too early in its time. But I think we have the right ingredients today, and it'll all depend upon how the consumers adopt and what kind of applications and systems and protocols and technologies that's going to come out to actually enable this kind of an experience, right? So it's absolutely going to depend on the user adoption, how much users are willing to adopt and play in that world. Like you said, today most of the time we are actually living in the physical world. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of time probably in the virtual world. But I think more and more, I think you will see that shift, inversion happening, that we would like to spend more on time, work in the metaverse, play in the metaverse, come back to the physical world for sleeping or something like that, right? So I think that if done correctly, if the experiences are really good, the adoption will be there. And if there's going to be adoption, you will actually see new protocols, new technologies that's actually emerging to make that world real. So in my opinion, it's all going to depend on adoption.
Well, time will tell how it all shakes out. It's going to be fascinating to watch. It's almost mind-blowing to think that there's this whole, as you said, second virtual world out there that is calling to everybody, and we may get to be a part of it sooner than later. So thank you, Gopal. I appreciate your time and your thoughts. Again, this is Bradley Barth from SC Media reporting from the Identiverse conference. Thanks for watching, and have a safe day online.